My mother bought my sister white roses for graduation. For me, she brought nothing. Not a card, not a flower, not even one of those cheap balloons from the grocery store that says, "You did it," in glittery letters. When I looked at the bouquet in her arms, my sister Sophie laughed and said, "Don't start, Rachel." Mom already had one graduation to care about today. My father heard her. He said nothing. My mother only whispered, "Please don't make today uncomfortable." 2 hours later, the hospital director stepped onto the stage, adjusted the microphone, and said my name in front of the entire auditorium, not just as a graduate, as the student who had paid her own tuition, worked overnight shifts cleaning hospital rooms, and still won the Mercy Hands Award for excellence in patient care. The room went completely still. My mother's face turned white. My father stopped clapping halfway through. And Sophie, who had been recording everything for Instagram, slowly lowered her phone. Because for the first time in my life, strangers were hearing the truth my family had spent years hiding behind one pretty excuse. Rachel is strong. She'll figure it out. My name is Rachel Hayes. And for most of my life, being strong was just the polite way my family explained why they could ignore me. I grew up in a small town outside Dayton, Ohio, in a beige one-story house with a cracked driveway, a chain-link fence, and a maple tree that dropped red leaves into the gutters every October. My father, Martin Hayes, worked as a mechanic at a transmission shop off Route 35. He came home smelling like motor oil and hand soap with grease still buried under his fingernails, no matter how hard he scrubbed. My mother, Elaine, worked the front desk at an elementary school. She remembered every teacher's birthday, every student's allergy, every parent's emergency contact. People loved my mother. They called her patient, warm, reliable. They had no idea that inside our house, her warmth had a favorite direction. It always went toward Sophie. Sophie was 18 months younger than me, but somehow she was treated like the baby forever. Blonde curls, soft blue eyes, and a trembling lower lip she could turn on whenever she wanted the whole room to bend. If Sophie cried, the house stopped. If Sophie had a headache, Mom dimmed the lights. If Sophie forgot her lunch, Dad drove it to school and acted like he was saving a life. When I forgot mine in 5th grade, Mom said, "Rachel, you're old enough to be responsible." That was the first family rule I learned. Sophie needed help. Rachel should know better. The second rule came soon after. Sophie was sensitive. Rachel could handle it. Those 2 rules explained my whole childhood. When Sophie scraped her knee, Mom lifted her onto the kitchen counter, cleaned the cut, gently kissed the bandage, and called her my poor baby. When I fell off my bike and tore my elbow open, Dad tossed me a towel from the garage and said, "You're tough, Rach. Don't bleed on the truck seat." When Sophie got scared during thunderstorms, she slept between my parents. When I got scared, Mom said, "You're the big sister." Set an example. I used to think that meant they trusted me. That was the lie I lived on for years. Trust sounds better than neglect. Independence sounds better than abandonment. Strong sounds better than unloved. By middle school, I had become the easy child. I packed my own lunch. I did my own laundry. I learned to cook spaghetti because Mom was tired after work. I helped Sophie with math homework she had ignored until bedtime. If I got an A, my parents said, "Oh, good job." If Sophie got a B-, they took her out for milkshakes because she had worked so hard. On my 13th birthday, I got a gray hoodie from the clearance rack. On Sophie's 13th birthday, she got a sleepover balloons, a sheet cake with pink frosting, and a silver charm bracelet Mom said she could add to over the years. I remember standing in the kitchen after everyone left scraping frosting off paper plates while Sophie held her wrist under the light. "Isn't it cute?" she asked. "It's nice," I said. She smiled, not kindly. "Maybe you'll get one when you stop acting like you don't care about things." That was Sophie's gift. She could turn your survival into an insult. By high school, the difference between us had become public. Sophie was in every family photo Mom posted online. Sophie at homecoming. Sophie holding a pumpkin. Sophie with Dad at the county fair. Sophie in a scarf with a Starbucks cup. Sophie in front of the Christmas tree smiling like the whole house had been decorated for her. Mom's captions were always the same. "So proud of our beautiful girl. Our sunshine. Can't believe how grown she is." Sometimes I was in the background. A shoulder, half a face, a shadow by the refrigerator. Once a woman from Mom's church commented, "Elaine, don't you have 2 daughters?" Mom replied, "Yes, Rachel is just camera shy." I stared at that comment for a long time. I wasn't camera shy. I had simply learned not to step into frames where nobody made room. Still, I kept trying in small ways. I worked hard. I stayed quiet. I stayed useful. I picked up shifts at Miller's grocery after school and saved money in an old cookie tin under my bed. I thought if I became responsible enough, helpful enough, low maintenance enough, one day my parents would look at me the way they looked at Sophie. But parents like mine do notice the easy child. They notice exactly how little they can give before you stop asking. Senior year, Sophie announced she wanted to go into dental hygiene. We were eating meatloaf at the kitchen table when she said it like she was announcing a royal engagement. I think I want to work in a dental office, she said. Cleaning teeth, helping people feel confident. Maybe one day I'll work somewhere upscale. Mom's face lit up. Oh, sweetheart, that is perfect for you. Dad nodded. Stable job. Good benefits. People always need dental work. Sophie smiled like she had already saved the world. Then Mom looked at me. What about you, Rachel? I set down my fork. I applied to the Radiologic Technology program at St. Agnes Community College. Dad frowned slightly. That's X-rays. X-rays, CT imaging. Hospital work. Sophie wrinkled her nose. So you'll just take pictures of broken bones all day. It's more than that. Sounds depressing. Mom gave her a soft look. Not everyone has your gentle way with people, Soph. Then she turned to me and added, but Rachel is practical. Hospital work fits her. Practical. That was what they called dreams when they belonged to me. Sophie was compassionate. Rachel was practical. Sophie had a future. Rachel had a job path. A few weeks later, both acceptance letters arrived. Sophie's came in a thick white envelope. Mom screamed when she opened it, even though Sophie had already checked online and knew she was accepted. Dad hugged her so hard she squealed. They put her letter on the fridge with a sunflower magnet. Mine came by email. I printed it myself at the library because our home printer was out of ink. When I brought it home, Mom glanced at it and said, "That's great, honey. Put it somewhere safe." I put it on the fridge beneath Sophie's. By morning, Sophie's letter was still there. Mine had been moved to the counter under a grocery flyer. Mom said she needed fridge space. I told myself it didn't matter. That was another lie I practiced until it sounded like maturity. The real break happened in July. I was folding towels in the hallway when I heard my parents talking in the kitchen. They were using their low voices, the ones adults think don't travel through thin walls. "We can cover Sophie's first year," Mom said. "Tuition books, instruments, maybe part of her rent." Dad sighed. "That's a lot. She needs a solid start, Martin. She gets overwhelmed." "What about Rachel?" I stopped folding. There it was, the question I had been too afraid to ask. Mom was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Rachel will figure something out. She always does." Dad didn't answer right away. I stood there holding a towel against my chest. Finally he said, "She is tougher." Mom sounded relieved. "Exactly. Rachel has grit. Sophie needs support." Grit. That word landed in my stomach like a stone. I waited for Dad to disagree. I waited for him to say, "But she's our daughter, too." I waited for anything. Instead, he said, "Yeah. Sophie's always been more fragile." That night, I learned that in my family, being strong didn't mean they believed in me. It meant I was cheaper to love. The next morning, Sophie bounced into the kitchen waving a folder. "Mom and Dad are paying my tuition," she said. "Isn't that insane?" She didn't look guilty. She looked shiny. I looked at Mom. Mom stirred her coffee slowly like she had rehearsed this. "We wish we could do the same for both of you," she said. "But Sophie's program has a lot of upfront costs. So does mine." Mom's smile tightened. "Yours is community college. It still costs money." Dad folded his newspaper. "Rachel, don't start." "I'm not starting. I'm asking." Sophie leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. "You always make things awkward when something good happens to me." I stared at her. Something good. That was how she saw it. Not as our parents choosing her. Just as another beautiful thing she deserved, and I was rude for noticing. "Mom said your sister needs this chance. And I don't." Mom sighed. A tired, disappointed sound. "Rachel, you've always been able to take care of yourself." I asked, "Did I have a choice?" The kitchen went silent. For 1 second, I saw the question hit her. Then Sophie scoffed. "Oh my God. Are you seriously turning this into some childhood trauma thing?" Dad stood up. "Enough." Mom's voice softened, but not in a kind way. In a closing the door way. "Rachel, Sophie deserves support right now. You're capable. That should mean something." I nodded. Because if I spoke, I would cry. And if I cried, they would call it drama. So I picked up my work apron from the chair and left for my shift at Miller's grocery. I cried in the employee bathroom between restocking cereal and cleaning spilled milk from aisle 4. Then I washed my face, clocked back in, and finished the night. That became my life. Class during the day. Clinical rotations at St. Agnes 3 mornings a week. Evening shifts at Miller's Grocery. Weekend shifts cleaning hospital rooms through an environmental services contractor. I learned how to change trash bags without tearing them. I learned which nurses were kind to cleaning staff and which ones looked through us like we were part of the floor. I learned that vending machine peanut butter crackers could count as dinner if you drank enough water. At 6 in the morning, I was in scrubs, learning how to position patients for chest x-rays. At midnight, I was in rubber gloves wiping down bed rails in rooms where families had just cried. Sophie's life looked different. She had a small apartment near her program, partly paid for by Mom and Dad. She had new scrubs in 3 colors. She had a ring light for videos about student life. She posted pictures of iced coffee, highlighted notes, and herself smiling in the mirror. Mom commented under every photo, "My hardworking girl. So proud of you, Soph. You were made for this." One night after working a double, I opened Instagram in my car. Sophie had posted a photo of herself holding dental tools with the caption, "No handouts, just hard work." Future smile queen, no handouts. My parents had paid her tuition 2 weeks earlier. I stared at those words until they blurred. Then I saw Mom's comment. "You earned every bit of it, sweetheart." That one hurt worse than the caption, because Sophie could lie to the world. But Mom knew. I didn't comment. I turned my phone off and drove to the hospital for my cleaning shift. A few weeks later, Mom posted a family photo from Sunday dinner. Sophie sat between my parents laughing. Dad's arm was around her chair. Mom's hand rested on Sophie's shoulder. I had been sitting on the other side of Dad that night. In the photo, I was gone. Not partly, not accidentally, cropped clean out. Only the edge of my sleeve remained near Dad's elbow. The caption said, "So proud of the future dental hygienist in our family. Big things ahead for our girl." Our girl. I waited to see if anyone noticed. Nobody did. Sophie shared the post to her story and added, "My support system. Couldn't do it without them." I almost threw my phone across the room. Instead, I saved the screenshot. Not as evidence. Not for revenge. Just because sometimes you need proof for yourself that the pain happened. The first time I almost quit was in February. Snow came down hard that night, thick and wet. My car battery died in the Miller's Grocery parking lot after closing. My coat was too thin. My phone was at 12%. I had an anatomy exam the next morning and a clinical shift at 6. I called home. Dad answered on the 4th ring. "Hey, Rach." "Dad," I said, trying not to let my teeth chatter. "My battery died at Miller's. Could you come jump it?" There was a pause. Then I heard Sophie's voice in the background. Dad covered the phone, but not fully. "She's stuck at work," he said. Mom said something I couldn't hear. Sophie said louder, "Dad, we're in the middle of dinner." Dinner. They were at Sophie's apartment. Dad came back on the line. "Can you ask your manager? The store's closed." "Well," he exhaled. "We're across town with your sister. She's had a rough day." I looked at the empty parking lot. The snowflakes looked gold under the streetlights. "What happened?" "She failed a practice quiz." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. I was stranded in a snowstorm because Sophie failed a practice quiz. Then Dad said the sentence I never forgot. "I can't leave your sister right now." I stood there with snow melting into my shoes. "You can't leave her. She's upset, Rachel." "My car is dead." "You're resourceful." "I know you'll figure it out." There it was again, the family prayer. "Rachel will figure it out." Dad added, "Text me when you get home." Not "I'm coming." Not "Are you safe?" "Text me when you get home." The call ended. That night, under a parking lot light outside a closed grocery store, I understood something with painful clarity. My parents did not believe I was strong. They simply believed I was less urgent. Mr. Alvarez, the grocery store manager, saw me from inside while he was locking the office. He drove his truck around, jumped my battery, and waited until my car started. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. He gave me a look. People who are okay don't look like that. I wanted to tell him everything. Instead, I said I have an exam tomorrow. He nodded slowly. "Then go pass it." So I did. I passed with a 96. No one at home asked. The second time I almost quit was worse. Tuition was due and I was short $600. 600, not 6,000, not some impossible number. Just $600 standing between me and continuing the program. I sold old clothes, picked up extra shifts, ate ramen for a week, paid one bill late, and prayed the fee wouldn't hit before payday. Still short. Finally, I called Mom. I sat on the edge of my bed in my tiny room, knees pulled up, rehearsing the words before she answered. "Hi, honey," she said. "Make it quick. Sophie's coming over." Of course she was. I swallowed. Mom, I'm short on tuition. 600. I'm not asking for a gift. I can pay it back by summer. I just need help before the deadline. Silence. Then a sigh. Not concern. Not surprise. A sigh. Rachel, we just paid for Sophie's board review course. I know. That was expensive. I know. And your father's hours were cut last month. I closed my eyes. Mom, I wouldn't ask if I had another option. She was quiet again. Then she said, you do have options. You always do. My throat tightened. I'm tired. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Mom's voice cooled. Everyone is tired, Rachel. No, I mean I'm really tired. Well, maybe you took on too much. I laughed once softly. What was I supposed to do? You could have chosen a slower path. Sophie didn't have to choose a slower path. That is different. Why? Because Sophie needs more support. I pressed my hand over my mouth for a second. Then I asked the question that had lived in me for years. Mom, do you ever wonder why I don't ask for support until I'm desperate? She said, don't make this emotional. There it was, the sentence that cut through everything. Don't make this emotional. As if the whole thing wasn't built out of emotion. As if favoritism was math. As if a mother choosing one daughter over another was just a budgeting decision. I whispered, you don't hear yourself, do you? She said, Rachel, I love you, but Sophie deserves this chance. You're strong enough to make your own way. I stared at the wall. There was a tiny crack near the ceiling I had never noticed before. You know what I said? You're right. Her voice softened with relief. I'm glad you understand. I do. But I didn't mean what she meant. I understood that I had been waiting for water from an empty well. I understood that the child they called strong had been begging quietly for years and they had chosen not to hear. I understood that if I kept calling home for love, I would keep hanging up with proof I didn't matter enough. So I ended the call. Then I cried. Not pretty tears. Not movie tears. The kind where your chest hurts and your face gets hot, and you hate yourself for still wanting comfort from people who keep refusing to give it. I gave myself 10 minutes. Then I washed my face, opened my laptop, and searched for emergency student grants. That search led me to the Mercy Hands Foundation Scholarship. It was sponsored through St. Agnes Regional Hospital for students entering patient care fields while working significant hours. The award covered tuition support and included recognition at graduation. I read the requirements 3 times. Essay, supervisor recommendation, clinical evaluation, proof of work hours. My first instinct was to close the page. Awards were for girls like Sophie, girls with mothers holding flowers, girls whose achievements were already framed before they happened. Then the next morning, during clinical rotation, Mrs. Evelyn Carter stopped me outside Imaging Room 3. Mrs. Carter was the lead radiologic technologist at St. Agnes. She was 60, maybe 65, with silver hair cut at her jaw and eyes sharp enough to catch a mistake before you made it. She was not warm in the usual way. She did not call people sweetheart. She did not waste compliments. But she saw everything. Hayes, she said, why do you look like you fought a raccoon and lost? I blinked. Good morning to you too. What's going on? Nothing. She stared at me. I lasted 3 seconds. Then I told her a small version. The tuition deadline, the extra shifts, the phone call. Not all the childhood stuff, but enough. When I finished, she crossed her arms. Apply for Mercy Hands. I saw that. Good, apply. I don't know if I'm the kind of student they pick. That is the dumbest sentence you've said in my presence. I almost smiled. She continued. You work harder than half the people in this building. Your patient care scores are excellent. You stay calm under pressure. And last week you got a scared 8-year-old through an X-ray by explaining the machine like it was a spaceship. He liked planets. He liked that you noticed he was scared. I looked away. Mrs. Carter's voice softened by half an inch. Rachel, stop waiting for the wrong people to decide you're worthy. That sentence hit me harder than anything my mother had said, because it didn't pity me. It called me forward. Mrs. Carter wrote the recommendation. Not a generic one. I know because she printed a copy and handed it to me with the warning, don't cry on it. The ink smears. She wrote that I was precise, compassionate, disciplined, and unusually aware of patients who tried to hide fear. She wrote that I understood dignity because I never treated any task as beneath me. I read the letter in my car and cried anyway. Just a little. Then I wrote the essay. I wrote it after shifts at midnight with sore feet and cheap coffee. I wrote about cleaning rooms before I learned to take images in them. I wrote about the old man who apologized for needing help sitting up. I wrote about the mother who held her toddler during an X-ray and kept saying, "Look at me, baby, not the machine." I wrote that care begins with noticing. I did not write my family never noticed me, but the sentence lived under every paragraph. I submitted the application 2 days before the deadline. Then I told no one. Not Mom, not Dad, definitely not Sophie. I had learned that sharing hope with people who resented your needs was a good way to watch hope get stepped on. Weeks passed. Sophie kept posting. Mom kept commenting. Dad kept liking every picture. I kept working. Then late April, after a cleaning shift, I sat in my car outside St. Agnes with my hair falling out of its ponytail and disinfectant smell stuck in my clothes. My phone buzzed. Subject line: Mercy Hands Foundation recipient notification. My hands went cold. I opened it. Dear Ms. Hayes, we are honored to inform you that you have been selected as this year's primary Mercy Hands Scholarship recipient. In recognition of your academic performance, clinical excellence, and extraordinary perseverance, you will also receive the St. Agnes Resilience and Care Award at the Allied Health Commencement Ceremony. I read it once, twice, a third time. Then I put the phone down on the passenger seat and covered my mouth. There was no screaming, no dramatic music, no crowd. Just me alone in a 10-year-old car in the dark, realizing I had made it through something my family would probably never fully understand. I told Mrs. Carter first. She read the email, nodded once, and said, "Good." That was it. Good. Then she added, "Now stop looking surprised when your work has consequences." I laughed. For the first time in months, the laugh did not hurt. I texted the family group chat a few days later. Graduation is May 18th. Sophie's ceremony is at 11. Mine is at 2 at St. Agnes. I'd like you to come. Mom replied, "Of course, big day for Sophie. We'll try to make yours too. Depending on lunch. My graduation was scheduled somewhere after spinach artichoke dip." Sophie replied with a selfie in her cap. "Can't wait, family celebration day. Family celebration." I stared at those words. Then I typed, "See you there." Graduation morning arrived humid and bright. The kind of Ohio spring day where the sky looks cheerful even when your chest feels heavy. Sophie's ceremony came first. I went. Of course I went. That is something people don't understand about the overlooked child. We still show up. We show up even when nobody saves us a seat. We clap even when our hands are tired. We remember birthdays. We answer calls. We stand in the back and pretend it doesn't hurt to watch love move easily towards someone else. The auditorium was packed. Mom wore a blue dress and pearl earrings. Dad had trimmed his beard. Sophie walked across the stage in white shoes and a perfect blowout, waving like she had won a pageant. Mom cried. Dad stood and shouted, "That's my girl." I clapped too. Sophie saw me from the stage and gave me a little wave. Afterward, we took pictures outside under a tree. Sophie with Mom. Sophie with Dad. Sophie between them. Sophie holding the white roses. Sophie pretending to laugh. Sophie looking serious. Sophie throwing her cap. I stood nearby holding my own cap at my side. Finally, Mom glanced over. "Oh, Rachel, come here. We'll get one with both graduates." Sophie made a face. "Can we finish mine first?" My hair is already falling. Mom said just a few more. A few more became 15 minutes. By the time they remembered me, Dad looked at his watch. We should eat before Rachel's thing. Rachel's thing. Not ceremony. Not graduation. Thing. We went to a chain restaurant near campus because Sophie wanted spinach artichoke dip, and Mom said she had earned a treat. During lunch, they asked Sophie about everything. Her licensing exam, her classmates, her favorite instructor, whether she wanted to work in a family practice or a cosmetic dental office. Dad said, "You'll have patients asking for you by name." Mom said, "You've always had such a gentle way with people." Sophie smiled at me across the table. "So Rach," she said, dragging my name out, "is your ceremony long? Like, are they just calling names or do they do speeches and stuff?" "I guess you'll find out." Mom looked at her watch. "We may need to leave a little early if Sophie gets too tired." I set my fork down. "It's my graduation." Mom blinked, surprised by my tone. "I know, honey, but it's been a long day." For Sophie. Sophie rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, here we go." Dad frowned. "Rachel, not today." I looked at him. Something inside me became very still. "All my life you've told me not today," I said. "Not on Sophie's birthday. Not when Sophie is stressed. Not when Sophie has good news. Not when Sophie needs support. So when exactly is my day allowed to matter?" The table went quiet. Mom's face flushed. Then she leaned forward and whispered the kind of sentence only a mother can make sound gentle and cruel at the same time. "Rachel, please don't make Sophie feel guilty today. She worked hard too." I stared at her. Even on my graduation day, my mother was asking me to protect Sophie from the consequences of being favored. Sophie gave a sharp little laugh. "Wow, somebody wants a spotlight." I looked at her and smiled. "You've had one all morning. I think you can survive sharing the afternoon." Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, Sophie had no pretty comeback. My ceremony was smaller than hers, but it felt warmer the moment I stepped inside. The St. Agnes Auditorium had blue banners hanging from the walls, folding chairs filled with families, and hospital staff standing in the back in scrubs. There was no grand stage, no fancy lighting, no huge flower arrangements, but people knew each other's names. Mrs. Carter sat in the second row. When she saw me, she gave a single nod. That nod did more for me than my mother's roses ever could have. My family arrived 7 minutes before the ceremony began. Mom was still holding Sophie's bouquet. She had not bought flowers for me. Dad looked uncomfortable, like he sensed he had walked into a room where people knew something he didn't. Sophie sat between them, scrolling on her phone. The ceremony began. Names were called. Students walked. Families cheered. I sat with my hands folded in my lap and felt my heartbeat in my throat. Then Dr. Marlene Price, the hospital director, stepped to the microphone. She was tall, gray-haired, composed, the kind of woman whose voice made people sit straighter without knowing why. Before we continue, she said, "We have the honor of presenting this year's Mercy Hands Foundation Award and the St. Agnes Resilience in Care Recognition." I did not turn around, but I heard paper rustle behind me. Mom reading the program, finding my name. Dr. Price continued. "This award is given to one allied health graduate who has demonstrated exceptional perseverance, compassion, and commitment to patient care. This year's recipient completed her radiologic technology training while working overnight environmental service shifts in this very hospital." The room changed. I felt it. The air tightened. She maintained outstanding clinical evaluations, paid her own educational expenses, and became known among our staff for treating every patient, every coworker, and every task with dignity. Stillness filled the room. Not silence. Stillness. Silence is empty. Stillness is full of things people are afraid to say. Dr. Price smiled. "Please join me in honoring Rachel Hayes." For half a second, I couldn't move. Then Mrs. Carter stood. Then my classmates. Then nurses in the back. Then families who didn't know me. The applause rose like a wave. I stood and walked toward the stage. My legs trembled, but my back stayed straight. Every step felt like walking out of an old version of myself. The girl at the edge of pictures. The girl with the used hoodie. The girl stranded in the snow. The girl told not to be emotional. The girl who had mistaken being needed for being loved. Dr. Price handed me the glass award. "Congratulations, Rachel," she said quietly. "You earned this." I looked at the award in my hands. Then I said, "I know." Not loudly. Not arrogantly. Just honestly. For once I knew something good belonged to me. Dr. Price stepped aside and gestured toward the microphone. I had prepared a short speech, but standing there looking out at the room, I saw my family in the back. Mom's face was pale. Dad stared at the floor. Sophie's phone was lowered in her lap. No recording, no caption, no angle, just the truth sitting with them. I unfolded my paper. "My name is Rachel Hayes. I began, and I used to think being strong meant needing nothing." My voice shook, then steadied. But working here taught me something different. Care is not only what we give people when they are falling apart. Care is what we give people so they do not have to fall apart alone. The room was silent. Real silence. The kind that listens. I cleaned rooms here before I learned to take images here. I learned that dignity is not about status. It is about how we treat someone when they have nothing to offer us except their need. I looked at Mrs. Carter. Her eyes shone. "So thank you to the people who showed up for me. My instructors, my classmates, my supervisors, the staff who treated me like I belonged before I believed it myself." Then I said the part I had not written. "And to anyone who has ever been praised for being strong, when what you really needed was support, I hope you hear me clearly. You are allowed to need love. You are allowed to want respect. You do not have to earn your place in a family by suffering quietly." The applause started slowly, then grew, then filled the whole auditorium. I stepped back from the microphone, and when I finally looked at my family, I did not feel the satisfaction I expected. I felt release. Their faces were not punishment. They were proof that the truth had arrived without me begging it to. After the ceremony, people surrounded me. Classmates hugged me. Nurses congratulated me. Dr. Price introduced me to the imaging department manager, who said there would be a full-time position opening after boards. "We would be lucky to have you," she said. Lucky. I held that word carefully. My family waited near the wall. For once, they were not the center of anything. For once, Sophie looked ordinary. Mom approached first, still holding the white roses. "Rachel," she said, voice trembling, "why didn't you tell us it was that hard?" I looked at the flowers, then at her. "I did." She blinked. I said, "You just called it drama." Her face crumpled. Dad cleared his throat. "We didn't know you were working nights at the hospital. You didn't ask." He looked ashamed. Good. Not because I wanted to hurt him. Because shame is sometimes what truth feels like when it finally gets inside. Sophie crossed her arms. "I didn't know either." I turned to her. "You didn't want to know." Her eyes flashed. "That's not fair." "No," I said softly. "It wasn't." She looked away. Mom suddenly looked down at the bouquet in her arms. The white roses were still wrapped in clear plastic tied with a pale ribbon, perfect and untouched. She pushed them toward me. "Here," she said quickly. "Take these, please." I stared at the flowers. The same flowers Sophie had held in every photo that morning. The same flowers Mom had carried into my ceremony like an afterthought. The same flowers that had never been meant for me until other people clapped. I looked at Sophie, then back at Mom. "No," I said. Mom's hand froze. I said those were never mine. The words landed harder than I expected. Mom's mouth parted. Dad looked down. Sophie's face turned pink. I continued calmly, "I don't want leftovers from her celebration." "Rachel," Mom whispered. I shook my head. "You don't get to hand me the same flowers after the room finds out you forgot to bring me any." Sophie scoffed, but her voice shook. "So what now? You're better than us." There she was, the old Sophie, sharp the second the room stopped protecting her. I met her eyes calmly. "No, I'm just done being beneath you." She had no answer. Mom reached for my arm. I stepped back. Her hand froze again. That small space between us held years. The moved acceptance letter, the cropped photo, the dead car battery, the tuition call, the restaurant, the roses. Mom whispered, "We're proud of you." I nodded. "Thank you." She looked relieved for 1 second. Then I said, "But I needed parents before I needed applause." That broke something in her face. Dad sat down in a folding chair like his legs had given out. Mom started crying. "Rachel, please, don't ruin today." I almost smiled. There it was again. Even now my truth was being treated like the thing that ruined the day. "Mom," I said, "I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped hiding it." Dr. Price called my name from across the room. The imaging manager wanted to introduce me to another supervisor. I looked at my family one last time. "I have to go." Mom wiped her cheeks. "Can we at least take a picture?" The question hit me harder than I expected. All my life I had wanted them to ask, to pull me in, to put an arm around me, to say, "Rachel, stand here. We want you in this." But now, standing there with my award in my hands, I understood why she wanted the picture. Not because she had finally seen me, because everyone else had. I said, "Not today." Sophie muttered, "Hashishade." I looked at her. "You had your pictures this morning." Then I walked away. My phone buzzed all night. Mom texted, "We love you. We are so sorry. Please come home so we can talk." Dad texted, "I'm proud of you, kiddo." Should have said it more. Sophie waited 3 hours. Then sent, "I didn't realize you felt so ignored." I stared at that message for a long time. Felt so ignored. Not were ignored. Felt. Even her apology needed room to protect herself. I typed back, "I hope one day you understand the difference." Then I turned my phone over. That night I didn't go home. I went to a diner with Mrs. Carter and 2 classmates. It was the kind of place with red vinyl booths, weak coffee and pie spinning slowly in a glass case. We ordered burgers at 10 at night. Someone got pancakes. Mrs. Carter lifted her coffee mug and said, "To Rachel, who needs to learn how to accept help without looking suspicious." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. And for once, being laughed at did not feel like being mocked. It felt like being known. A week later, I passed my boards. 2 weeks after that, St. Agnes offered me the full-time imaging position. The pay was not glamorous, but it was steady. My first apartment was small with squeaky floors and a kitchen window that faced a brick wall. My couch came from Facebook Marketplace. My dishes did not match. But the first night I slept there, I woke up at 3 in the morning to complete silence. No family group chat buzzing about Sophie. No mother sighing because I needed something. No father calling me tough instead of helping. just my keys on the counter, my scrubs on the chair, my name on the lease. Freedom, I learned, does not always feel like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like nobody asking you to make yourself smaller before breakfast. My parents tried after that. Mom invited me to Sunday dinner. Dad offered to change my oil. Sophie tagged me in an old childhood photo with the caption, "Sisters Forever," as if nostalgia could do the work of accountability. I did not cut them off completely, but I stopped living on crumbs. When Mom called during a shift, I called back when I had time. When Dad said family is family, I said, then family should act like it. When Sophie complained that I had become cold, I told her, no, I just stopped keeping myself warm by standing near people who kept shutting the door. She didn't like that, but I was no longer responsible for making the truth comfortable. 3 months later, Mom left a small bouquet of yellow daisies outside my apartment door. No note, no apology speech, just daisies wrapped in brown paper. I stood in the hallway for a long time looking at them. They were simple, uneven. One stem was bent. They were not white roses. They had not been bought for Sophie first. I picked them up and brought them inside. That did not mean everything was fixed. It did not mean I had forgiven all of it. It did not mean I was ready to sit at that kitchen table and pretend childhood could be repaired with flowers. It only meant I could accept something small without handing back the boundaries I had fought so hard to build. That is what people misunderstand about dignity. Dignity is not always walking away forever. Sometimes dignity is deciding how close people are allowed to stand after they have shown you how easily they can overlook you. I put the daisies in a glass jar beside my sink. Then I went to work. Life did not become perfect. Some days still hurt. Some holidays still felt strange. Sometimes I saw old family photos online and felt that old ache in my ribs. But I no longer tried to squeeze myself into places where I had never been given room. I built new rooms. At St. Agnes, patients learned my name. Coworkers saved me coffee. Mrs. Carter still corrected me with terrifying precision. Mr. Alvarez from Miller's Grocery sent me a card that said, "Knew you'd pass." I taped it inside my kitchen cabinet where I could see it every morning. The award from graduation sits on a small shelf in my apartment now. Not in the center, not under a spotlight, just beside a framed photo from that diner night with Mrs. Carter and my classmates. In the photo, my hair is messy, my eyes are tired, my smile is real, and for once I am not standing at the edge. I am right in the middle. Sometimes I think about the girl I used to be. The girl standing outside family pictures. The girl clapping for Sophie with tired hands. The girl laughing off disappointment before anyone could call her dramatic. The girl who thought being easy to ignore was the price of being loved. I wish I could go back and sit beside her. I would tell her she was never hard to love. She was just surrounded by people who loved convenience more than fairness. I would tell her that being overlooked does not make you invisible. Being unsupported does not make you unworthy. And being called strong does not mean you should have to carry everything alone. My parents paid for Sophie's future because they thought hers mattered more loudly. They left me to build mine because they thought I could survive the silence. And I did. But surviving is not the same as being loved. That was the lesson I had to learn. Sometimes dignity is not a slammed door. Sometimes it is a quiet step backward. Sometimes legacy is not what your family gives you, but what you refuse to pass on. And sometimes the best revenge is not making people regret losing you. It is becoming someone they can no longer deny than choosing peace over their permission. So if you have ever been the strong one, the forgotten one, the child who had to clap for everyone else while nobody clapped for you, remember this. You are allowed to stop performing toughness. You are allowed to ask for respect. You are allowed to build a life where love does not have to be earned by bleeding quietly. And if your family only notices your worth after the whole room starts clapping, you are allowed to smile, say thank you, and keep walking toward the life you built without them. If you were, Rachel, would you forgive parents who only became proud after strangers started clapping? Or would you keep your distance and protect your peace?